Hey there, Heather. Ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to another Cutter Top 10 NFL video. And this time we're going to be looking at the top 10 NFL wildcard games of all time. As the wildcard round is beginning, in essence, the weekend of January 10th. And the 2026 wildcard looks like this. Of course, I know you'll be saying, no, that's 2025. Well, 2025 season, but this is in 2026. We have ourselves in the AFC, we have the 7th seed LA Chargers with maybe a not 100% Justin Herbert taking on the number 2 seed New England Patriots, my Patriots. One of the biggest surprises in the NFL. I mean, I didn't even think they were going to win the division. You have the number 6 Buffalo Bills, who everyone thought should have won the AFC East, and I agree with them in a sense. They take on the number 3 seed Jacksonville Jaguars, the AFC South champions, who have put up some great defense, and Trevor Lawrence has picked up right where he left off. And the number 5 seed Houston Texans from the AFC South take on the number 4 seed in the AFC North champion on the final game of the season, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think Houston might pull one out over Aaron Rodgers. They have a good defense themselves. I think Buffalo will beat Jacksonville, and I think Pats will beat the Chargers. In the NFC, we have the 7 seed Green Bay Packers facing their internal rivals, the number 2 Chicago Bears. That should be an interesting one. Remember, the last time Packers and Bears met in the playoffs was 2011 in the NFC title game, and Green Bay beat the Bears. The 6th seed, I believe, is the San Francisco 49ers. They take on the number 3 Philadelphia Eagles. I think this game might be 50-50 because the Eagles and Niners have been struggling. Don't be surprised if San Fran pulls up an upset, but maybe Philly wins. And the number 5 seed LA Rams take on the number 4 seed, the NFC South champion, despite being below 500, the Carolina Panthers. I have a thing for Chuba Hubbard in Carolina. You know, Chuba's Canadian, but I think the Rams will do it. NFL.com did a listing, and they said that the Rams had the best Super Bowl odds of any team not the number 1 seed. And of course, Denver and Seattle are the number 1 seeds and don't have to play this weekend. Nevertheless, I gave you a bit of Cliff's Notes about the 2026 playoffs, so here we go. It's the top 10 wildcard games of all time. And this will be an interesting one. Number 10 is the Titans Chiefs from 2017. This was a massive one in which the Chiefs were looking pretty good at home. Now, a lot of people forget that the Chiefs were helpless and hopeless at home in the playoffs for many years and all that. In 95 and 97, they had golden chances to take care of business, being the AFC West champions and winning 13 games within the year, but they couldn't win a home game to save their lives. Patrick Mahomes was trying to help this stuff kind of in the 2010s, but then the Titans with Marcus freaking Mariota, second-year quarterback, pulled off a stunner. He actually caught his own pass, and there was a couple of touchdowns that made Sean McDonough voice crack on ABC. But the Titans beat the Chiefs, sending Kansas City to another playoff doldrum event. Like the doldrums were just there. Number 9 is 2018 Jaguars versus Steelers. It was an 87-point shootout, and everyone thought Pittsburgh was going to easily take care of Jacksonville because Jacksonville just does not have good offense. All that. Unfortunately, though, Jacksonville proved everyone wrong by winning 45-42 in a massive shootout of the Steelers against the Steelers. I mean, how can you believe that? But yeah, it happened. It really happened, and all that. Number 8 is Steelers Bengals 2006. In 2006, the Bengals were the AFC North champions, and it looked pretty good. The Steelers were the 6th seed and had to start at the number 3 seed Cincinnati Bengals in the wild card round, back when there were 6 teams per conference. Pittsburgh started off strong, even though Cincy had a good pass. Carson Palmer threw a nice pass for a first down. Unfortunately, though, Kimo von Ofthoffen kind of banged into Carson Palmer, injuring him and ruining the Bengals' chances as the Steelers would go on to beat the Bengals, and the Bengals' long frustrations of winning a playoff game weren't quelled until 2021. So that was just humongous. Number 7 is the Steelers Browns from 2003. The first half of a very epic doubleheader on a Sunday afternoon. The Steelers were hosting the Browns, and everyone thought Cleveland was going to be screwed because this was their first playoff appearance as the new Cleveland Browns. Of course, the old Cleveland Browns moved to Baltimore, but they forced Baltimore to give up all the franchise history and all that so that Cleveland can get it back whenever the city got a team back. So, anyway, Cleveland, with Kelly Holcomb at the controls, had a 17-point lead on the Steelers, and it looked like Cleveland was going to get back to respectability. Unfortunately, though, Pittsburgh pulled it off. Touchdown Tommy Maddox, the XFL MVP the previous season, going to Pittsburgh, replacing Cordell Stewart at pivot. He helped the Steelers take down the Browns. Same old Browns, in a sense. But the Browns did get revenge 18 years later against the Steelers in the wildcard round by beating them in a shock. So, yeah, that was just what ended up happening and all that. Number 6 is the Indianapolis Colts Kansas City Chiefs from 2014. Kansas City came into Indianapolis trying to ruin Andrew Luck's chances in the playoffs. And this was not Patrick Mahomes, I don't think. No, Mahomes was a few years prior. But anyway, yeah. The Colts and the Chiefs were battling. Alex Smith was doing it, and Kansas City had a 28-point lead, and it looked like it was game, set, match for the Chiefs to win in Indianapolis. But Andrew Luck did his job. He even caught his own pass. Well, actually, no. He was running for the end zone, and then the ball got fumbled, and then somehow he scooped it up and got across the goal line. So that game was epic as the Colts would beat the Chiefs, coming back from a 28-point deficit. It's not the biggest in history and all that. Number 5 is the Green Bay Packers Arizona Cardinals from 2010. 2010 was big. You know, Arizona was hosting a playoff game, which rarely happened. This was the team that the previous year actually went to the Super Bowl and gave Pittsburgh everything they got. However, the Arizona Cardinals faltered in the Super Bowl, but they were trying to prove that they were still a good team, and they proved it against the Packers. It was a 96-point game combined with overtime and over 1,000 total yards of offense. So yeah, Arizona had Larry Legends and Larry Fitzgerald, and Green Bay had Aaron Rodgers. So it went down to the final play as Aaron Rodgers was trying to throw a pass, kind of it batted up, and then Carlos Dansby caught the ball for Arizona. Touchdown Cardinals. Arizona beat Green Bay. So that's what happened. Number 4 was the famous comeback by the San Francisco 49ers against the New York Giants in a key game. Remember what I said about the Steelers and the Browns? Well, this was the second half of the craziest day ever. As the Giants had a 24-point lead in San Francisco, and it looked pretty good that Kerry Collins was going to outduel Jeff Garcia and get the Giants to the next round. But then the Niners remembered who the heck they were and threw a couple of passes to Terrell Owens and a few other receivers and J.J. Stokes, and basically got a couple of Giants players disqualified from the game. So the Niners were up 39-38, and the Giants had a 40-plus yard field goal attempt and had a chance. But unfortunately, the snap was wild, and they threw it down the field trying to get some kind of play. And apparently, the Niners were going to get penalized for pass interference because the guy downfield was going to have it. And it would have been pass interference, 15 yards, and then they try the kick. But somehow, in some way, the referee screwed it up by calling pass interference, by calling ineligible man downfield on the Giants, saying that the guy who was trying to catch that pass was ineligible. Unfortunately, though, they got their numbers mixed up, and the guy was eligible to go downfield to try to get the ball, and it was pass interference. Well, actually, it was 50-50. The amount illegal man downfield and the pass interference negated everything. The call Well, the play stood, and the Niners were going to move on to the divisional round. The Giants were screwed. And poor Trey Junkin, who was actually persuaded out of retirement a week before this game, would never let it down. So that's what happened. And the Niners ended up beating the Giants. Also, you could also say about Dallas versus Seattle in the wild card round when Tony Romo fumbled the snap and Martin Gramatica could not kick the field goal, and then Romo tried to run for the first down, which he almost did, but Jordan Babineau tackled him in Romo's first playoff start. Uh, Number 3 is the Music City Miracle. This was actually the first game played in the 21st century and all that. So, anyway, what ended up happening was that Y2K was threatening to ruin everything. So the first Saturday of the year, January 1st, 2000, was supposed to be when the wild card round happened. But because, Y2K was going to screw everything around, apparently the NFL changed the schedule to January 8th. Fortunately, nothing bad happened. So anyway, the Music City Miracle happened. So it was the Titans versus the Bills. Buffalo made a controversial move by not having Doug Flutie start against the Titans. It would be Rob Johnson. Of course, the controversy was that Buffalo signed Rob Johnson just days after signing Doug Flutie from the CFL. And they trusted Rob more than Flutie, even though Flutie had some great Flutie magic, and the Flutie Flakes were on the shelves in Buffalo to support Doug Flutie Jr., who had autism. The Titans were kind of like the problem with the Titans is they basically were embarrassed to be at the wild card party. They were 13-3, and you're thinking 13 wins and you're in a wild card game? How? Well, simple. They didn't win their division. That was Jacksonville. Jacksonville with their 14-2 mark won the division, not Tennessee's 13-3. That was crazy. But yeah, the Titans 13 wins and they had to go to the wild card playoff was just shocking and all that. But yeah, Buffalo actually almost made the coaching staff, Wade Phillips, look like a genius. It was 16-15 for Buffalo, and they decided to squib kick it. And then Tennessee did something that they said they practiced. They would lateral it. And then apparently there was a lateral from Wycheck to Dyson. But apparently the ball was going forward over it was a kind of a forward pass. The line was like it looked like it went that way, which would or this way actually, which would have meant that that was an illegal forward pass. But it counted, and then all those laterals, and then 70 plus yards later, touchdown Titans. There are no flags on the field. Tennessee has pulled out a miracle. Oh, good Lord, no. Buffalo was really fuming, and for good reason. For one thing, it made Wade Phillips look like a douchebag by picking Johnson over Flutie, and of course sent Flutie to San Diego, among other things. But yeah, Buffalo choked, and then the worst part was the last time. That was the last time for 17 years that Buffalo even got to the playoffs and all of that. You think that the Giants and Jets problems are big, but try going 17 straight years without making the playoffs. That's hard to do in this day and age, obviously. Number 2 is Beastquake between the Seattle Seahawks and the defending Super Bowl champion New Orleans Saints. New Orleans did not win their division. They had to go to Seattle to play the Seattle Seahawks, who actually were 7-9. They beat the Rams on the final day of the season, actually winning at 7-9 and winning the division. People thought that Seattle didn't deserve to be there because there were 2 games below 500. It's akin to years later with Carolina hosting Arizona and me telling people that don't count out Carolina, even though they're 7-9, they're at home and all that, and I was proven correct. But the fact of the matter is that the Seahawks played the Saints very tough, and then with about 2.5 minutes left, Seattle gave the ball to Marshawn Lynch, who ran the ball and then gave a massive stiff arm to Tracy Porter, who was the guy who sealed New Orleans' Super Bowl win against the Colts. And Marshawn did all that and then danced into the end zone. 67 yards, Beastquake, break out the Skittles. What's even more impressive was called Beastquake for a main reason. Because for some strange reason, the Seattle fans, because Seattle's kind of got the loudest stadium in the league because of, the acoustics. But it was so loud and so vibrating that it actually caused a partial tremor in the University of Washington seismic counter. So yeah, it registered on a seismic counter. That's why it's called Beastquake. Seattle took out the defending Super Bowl champion Saints 41-36, and they gave the ball to Marshawn Lynch. What would happen? And then 4 years later, they didn't give the ball to Marshawn Lynch, and you know what happened. Sorry, Seattle fans. And number one, by a long shot, the comeback, or as Houston calls it, the choke. The Bills and the Oilers. The Bills and Titans met each other in 2000. What's funny is that those two franchises met in 93. Well, of course, we all know about the Oilers, once being called it was the Oilers first, then the Titans. Anyway, the Bills and Oilers would face each other. It was a dismal game if you're a Buffalo Bill fan at first. I mean, not only were they down 28-3 at the half, they didn't even have their star Jim Kelly. Jim Kelly was injured in Houston. Ironically, the previous week was the last week of the regular season in Houston, and the Bills lost Jim Kelly to injury. So they had to use Frank Reich. And everyone's like, well, that sucks. But people forgot that Frank Reich led the greatest college football comeback of all time again for his Maryland Terrapins against the Miami Hurricanes. They were down 31-0 and won 42-40 in 1984, the same year as, of course, Hale Flutie. But the fact of the matter is that, they were in trouble. And then Bubba McDowell had a pick six, and the Oilers were up 35-3 and looking good to go to Pittsburgh for their divisional round game. However, Buffalo kept chipping away. Warren Moon made some uncharacteristic mistakes. The running game wasn't there, and Buffalo kept passing to Lofton, to Don Beebe, and to Andre Reed. 38-35, the Bills had the lead after being down 35-3. Houston did kick a field goal to force overtime. They got the ball back to start overtime, but Warren Moon threw a pick. Few yards later, Steve Christie, the pride of Oakville, Ontario, kicked it through the uprights. Buffalo wins 41-38, and the Houston Oilers would become known as Choke City. I mean, they got the moniker because their teams always choked. The Rockets choked in the 81-86 finals, but give them credit. I mean, like, they lost to the Boston Celtics, who were great in the 1980s. The football team, faltering in the NFL styles, especially against Pittsburgh. They didn't have a hockey team in the NHL. In the WJ, they did. And in the baseball team, the Astros just couldn't get out of their way. That franchise would choke all the way until 2004, finally winning a playoff series against the Braves and giving St. Louis a run for their money in the NLCS. But that's what ends up happening. The Bills rode the momentum. Buffalo really rode momentum because the Bills won. I think they went to Pittsburgh. Yeah, they went to Pittsburgh in that game, divisional round game, beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh, and then went to Miami and beat Dan Marino for the AFC title. Of course, they got squashed by the Cowboys in the Super Bowl, but at least they got to the Super Bowl, despite being a wildcard team. And Houston, well, they bounced back. They had a 11 game winning streak to end the 93 season. And in 94, they got a bye. They hosted Kansas City in the divisional round game, but Joe Montana beat Houston in the largest football crowd in Astrodome history, and also Keith Cash, the tight end, throwing the ball into a Buddy Ryan poster. So that's just memorable for all those strange reasons. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. Let's hope Wildcard Weekend 2026 is just as good. I do.